discussions with the police chief, who obviously runs the day-to-day of the police, just to make sure things are in check and running as smoothly as can be.
And the mandatory overtime that you, I'm kind of still vague on that, and, so I'm a little slow at some of this stuff, so, basically what you're saying now is the police are gonna have, did you say something about 13 extra days?
Correct.
Okay, 13 extra, what, would that be vacation days?
No,
It's
just days not
off.
worked.
Days not worked.
Not
days
paid
not
for it, right.
Oh, okay. And so there would be an increase in their pay, but they would not have to actually do the overtime to get that? Am I correct or am I wrong?
What we did was, we did away with the 4 hours of mandatory overtime, 2 hours a week more or less. But instead of giving them a cut in pay, we left them keep that salary. They'll work 2 hours less a week, but keep the same salary.
No, they still
And
work.
then
they
we
still
gave
work.
them
They
2%
still work.
raise
Still work.
on to that.
They still work 84.
Still working.
Right, they just don't get paid the overtime.
Correct.
For that.
So they get paid straight time for that?
Correct.
Oh, so they're getting paid straight time for,
84 hours every 2 weeks.
But it's still the same, the straight time for those 84 is the same as what it was last year at 80 and 4 hours.
It comes out to be 7.5%. So what they're doing is, or what's been agreed upon, is that they're increasing the base salary of each officer 7.5% to compensate for the loss of that mandatory overtime. Obviously, the officers don't want to lose pay, so in exchange of giving up that mandatory overtime, the board is the agreement is to increase the base salary 7.5%. That's outside of the 2%, 3% raises. That's
and they're still working the overtime, but they're just working at, so how does that balance out, the 7% as opposed to actually working, who's actually, to what benefit is that on, whose benefit is that, basically?
Well, I mean, it's a benefit to the township and to them as well, I believe. They're still working the same number of hours, but you don't have that contract or mandatory overtime, which was kind of an outdated kind of concept that not a lot of townships use for their police departments. It's more this chart day where they have in lieu of that, they get the 13 other days based on that due to working 12-hour shifts.
And also then the incidental overtime basically then would be less because they're still working basically the same amount of hours. So, it should already be covered according to the way at least the incidents are happening now, correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's, the chief's job to control the overtime. Obviously, there'll be incidental overtimes when there's, a major incident that requires somebody to stay longer than their shift, or, some other event that requires them to come in. But that's, between the chief and them, and then obviously the board to make sure the chief is keeping the actual overtime in check. So there is no more mandatory overtime in their weekly schedules.
All right, thank you.
I just have one more thing, still not clear about it. The 7.5% is rather generous. In other words, if I was working and I worked less hours, I got 7% increase in this day and age when really inflation's like less than 2%. That seems rather generous, 7%. And I realize there's a lot of moving parts in this, complexities to it, but I'm not sure that, again, the taxpayer is getting a fair shake in this.
This is they're still working the same number of hours. They're still working, scheduled 84 hours every 2 weeks. But now they're getting those extra 13 days as part of it. The adjustment of that 7.5% was, the way you could look at it is to say that what their base pay plus contract overtime was previously is really what their base salary was. That's what they were making no matter what. They were working 84 hours, 4 hours were overtime every 2 weeks.
They were getting paid for that, though.
They were getting paid for that, correct. So the base plus that contract overtime is really what they would expect around in their paychecks every week, every 2 weeks. And then any other overtime beyond that is regular overtime. So the idea was to make them whole there, you know, while negotiating with them, while also getting, you know, the increase in the medical and the switch over to chart days instead of contract overtime. So the 7.5% is an adjustment to get their base salary in line with what they were actually making on a week-to-week basis. And then giving a 2% on top of that.
Well, let's take, for example, somebody's earning $35 an hour, 35 an hour. Now, in simple terms, with all these different adjustments, what would it now be? In other words, 35 was in 2016. What would that 35 be in 2017, considering the new contract? I mean, approximately, just ballpark.
Isn't the math more complicated? Because
Yeah.
they were getting 35 plus time and a half for mandatory hours.
Correct.
I think what Steve is trying to say is
Yeah,
if
I'm
you
not
took,
wording it right, I don't think.
if you took the current base under the proposed agreement, that equals the base plus the mandatory overtime under the old agreement, essentially to try to make it a wash.
So it's a wash then.
Correct.
That's my understanding.
Right. It really comes down, it's just a shifting of money. And being honest, you know, the mandatory overtime, as was stated, isn't something normally found in police contracts. Speaking to our legal representation, just to review it, he felt it should have been fought the last time that it was awarded. Given that it will be renegotiated next time, it won't be a ding in the contract. So it won't be there, so any arbitrator looking at it won't see what's going on right now. There's no real ding in the contract. The other problem with it, and believe me, I'm not, don't let what I'm saying think how I'm voting. I mean, I don't see any alternative. But the other thing is that it has an effect on the regular overtime because now their base pays more. So if the overtime itself is not controlled, given that their base pay has been increased not only with the 7.5%, but also with the 2%, it could be a lot more on the overtime side. But the chief said that he's gonna, we had a discussion with him tonight, and he's definitely gonna be watching that area, but that's one of the consequences of the regular overtime is that the pay has been increased there.
Steve, what did we go up, the actual base rate for everyone, 10,000?
Yes, for 2017 year, the total increase was just under $10,000 for
Yes,
base
sir.
salary.
For all the base salaries, it went up $10,000 total for this coming year.
Yeah, it's about
Everyone was
9,500.
set at even after the whole hourly thing. And they'll put in probably around $18,000 more into their health insurance.
They will, which is less than.
Because it was 5% of a 4-year-old rate, and now it'll be 10% of a rate that just went up 37%.
But they're contributing more of their health
family.
insurance.
Correct.
Right.
Only on the,
They
only on
only
the,
handle all their health insurance.
The officer themselves are not being increased. It's
No.
only on those with
family
family
plans,
Yeah.
which is
Only
everybody.
those
Not on the individual policy, it's just
Yeah.
on whoever they add on, wife, children, and so
Correct.
forth.
And there is one area to look at something that could be beneficial to the township, is that the level, I mean, this is a hard area, but medical is increasing and it's quite substantial for the family plan for the township. It's 35,000. But the township does offer a 50% reimbursement if someone has a spouse that has medical, or if they choose to elect to get their own plan themselves. That gives them, you know, if someone wants to, aren't happy with this insurance plan, 16,000 is quite a lot to shop for a medical plan out there. But hopefully, you know, the reason why a previous board put that in place is that to try to save the township at least 50% in medical costs. So maybe if some of these officers have a family member or a spouse that has a medical plan, $16,000 bonus versus costing township $35,000 or more, because the medical could go up. They might bite at it more now.
The medical is something to watch, but that was, you know, a big move up to get to 10%, so that's the trade-off.
And then pension, is that affected? I mean, obviously their pension, if they're more on their base, had more advantage with a pension, was contributed, I guess, from the township. I guess these are all defined pensions, is that right, rather than a 401K, or is there a combination of pensions? or
State
is it
pension
defined?
based on
state-
what they made, right?
State pension.
State pension.
It's
With-
what?
with
State
their-
pension.
State pension, okay. And then one last question, on the 13 days, does that include vacation time, or what are 13 days again? There are 13 above and. 13
Beyond, yeah, correct, that's the way.
13 days above and beyond their vacation
Correct.
days? So if you had 4 weeks vacation, it would be 13 days in addition to that,
Correct.
which includes any day, or the holidays, or, I mean, any day, or?
Well, I mean, that's, you know, the chief will work with them on that as far as, you know, kind of controlling that, obviously, to not, you know, have it being taken advantage of, or it to be scheduled within a certain amount of time, or, you know, whatever he or the board deems fit as far as using those 13 extra days.
And they don't get them as a 13-day lump, it'll come
Yeah.
once every every pay period, you'll lose one day. But they won't, he won't schedule them every 2 weeks, one day,
Okay.
or every 4 weeks, I'm sorry. They'll just lose a day of schedule, they won't get a 13-day vacation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Now?
I did forget to ask, I was in union all my life. I was in several different unions actually, because when I changed jobs. And, you know, so I'm a union person. But I'm wondering why, that if this contract is ratified, it will be for this year
And next year.
and next year. And when would negotiations start for the new contract?
Next
In
year.
2019 or next?
2018.
Next year.
In 2018. So basically, you got basically a year, you know, before you're back into negotiations. As a union person, I've always seen when the union goes in negotiations with the company, union always tries to go for 3, 4, 5 years of contract before renegotiating a contract. I'm wondering why this is only basically a 1-year contract.
That came down to the medical. The difference being, you know, having the 10% based off of the current rate of 2017 versus having it based off of whatever the current rate is of that year. So with the 2-year, what's happening is that it's the 2017 rate, 10% of the 2017 rate for 2017 and 2018. Instead of doing 10% of the 2017 rate and then doing 10% of the 2018 rate. That's why it's 2 years at the fixed rate. That was one of the, you know, trade-offs that we made back and forth to come to an agreement.
And they wanted a 3-year contract.
They wanted 3-year, but
We
didn't want to go to the
wouldn't give
merit.
them a 3-year with a set rate for the hospitalization. If they wanted 3 years, the only way we would do it is, it was 10% of each year's rate, whatever it is. So if it went up 50% next year, and that's what they didn't want to take the gamble on, the fact that the hospitalization would stay the same. That's why they settled for a 2-year contract.
And plus, the shifting of money, I mean, regardless of police officers, just looking at this as a contract, it's very wise to them to do the money play here with moving everything over, because they can come back the following year and negotiate for more raises. I mean, so the shifting of the mandatory overtime, that technically might not have, if it was fought last time, wouldn't even be there. It's smart for them. I don't think it's smart for the township to do a 2-year contract, but that's how we worked it out, with the hope that in the future that the medical would be looked at, you know, hopefully by that board at that time. But from a union perspective, I think that was really smart by them. I mean, they're doing some maneuvers in the contract, and, you know, good for them, I guess.
Yeah, just have a quick follow, because Mrs. Scott's been waiting as well.
Oh, okay, I only have one more comment, and it's been brought up before. And, you know, altogether, we have 13 part-time and 12, okay. We have 12 police in this county, and I see there's 175 issues on there. And I'm just wondering, how does West Bradford have no police? I mean, they have no crime? They don't have traffic incidents or anything like, how does that happen? You know, where is it, how come there's such a great disparity?
They have the state police in the center of the township. and they pay the state police instead of paying individual police.
No,
So
they-
that's part of
no,
their
they do not
budget, is to pay the state police?
Pardon me?
No, they do not pay the state
They
police.
have to pay the state police.
No,
The state
they
police do
don't.
not do it for free, Sharon.
They
Yeah,
do,
they
they
do.
aren't
They
required,
do
there's
so
no
far still?
contract.
Yes,
they are for now.
I'm sorry, Sharon.
Basically, that's my question. I've always,
Talked about,
I've always asked that same question, is why we need 12 or 13, at last year it was 13 police between the part-time and the
So
full-time.
that you have two guys on duty at all times?
Okay. And so West Bradford has no police, and that's what I'm trying to
They have the
say.
state
And
police at their
Irv brought up
disposal.
the fact that the police budget is the biggest part of this township budget. Okay, so now you're talking about Mortonville Road and you're gonna repair that, but, oh, we can't do that because, you know, we're protecting our citizens, which I'm sure you are, but how does, you know what I'm saying?
Oh, I understand.
I'm looking at the
It's a big chunk
ratio of
money.
crime as opposed to the number of police, basically. That's all I'm saying. That's my comment.
To quickly follow up on Randy's point, that there have been bills, and I think there might be one that's gonna be introduced again, to require the municipalities who have state police to pay a portion.
The three buildings kind of running out.
Question, is our chief a working policeman?
Yes.
So he issues citations, et
Yes,
cetera?
yes, absolutely.
Okay. I would say, and we have 12 police officers on the roster at this time. How many's full-time?
7,
There's 7 total.
7 total. Yep.
right, there was an $80,000 savings this year. I asked the chief if he would forego hiring the 8th officer if we increased the part-time, which is less for 25,000, so we have 80,000 back into our general fund, where in years past, we were paying for an 8th officer. So there is a savings in the police department with this year's budget with that.
And how many part-time?
There's 4 total.
4.
I would say we could have, let's say, we don't need to have a chief. That would be a savings. We're not required by contract, et cetera, to have a chief. So I do not think we need that. That would be a savings. And in reference to West Bradford, no, they did have a police department, they got rid of it.
What did it cost them to build the building? That building was given to the state police in return for so many years of free
No,
service.
the
lease it.
state leases it. The state pays West
They
Bradford
make money.
to be there. They're making money.
I'd have to
West
check
Bradford
that,
is,
Sharon.
it is accurate. I've already checked it.
Yeah, Jeff knows.
They pay, West Bradford build it, the state of Pennsylvania pays West Bradford. And West Bradford pays nothing for police protection.
Sharon, I can't wait 20 minutes for the state cop to drive from Emeryville to here. When he's 2 miles away, that's fine. I can't tell some lady whose husband's being a moron that she has to wait 20 extra minutes. I'd love to do that. I'd love to take the police force, and no offense to Chief Porter, and do away with it and make my day. When I took this job,
Well,
I actually thought
I
about
didn't
doing
address
it.
you, I'm not interested
But-
in your
But
conversation.
I'm interested in protecting the people that need protected.
That's wonderful.
So
I
that's the
totally
whole reason.
agree too.
And 44%, or 43% in the next budget, is 7.2% less than West Callan pays out of their budget for their police force.
But this board admitted how ridiculous
Yeah,
it
theirs
was.
is 50.2% of their budget is.
They don't have
police.
24-hour coverage either.
I know, and they still pay 50.2% of their budget for a part-time force. We do 43% for around the clock.
The mandatory overtime. Shame on you all, and shame on the lawyer who
That was-
represented us.
That was,
That was-
Sharon, to be, I can elaborate, I was on the board.
Before.
These
That's
four, yeah, the solicitor wasn't here, these 4 other board members weren't here, but I was here. And I can tell you, what happened was, is we lost a solicitor that was handling the case right in the middle of the case. And we, the firm that was previous to us put somebody else in place. It was a bad situation, and when it went into there, there's a lot of questions I had about things going on. There was no way to solve it at that time. You really needed a good firm to say, hey, I mean, this current firm was the first time I ever heard that it should have been fought for. So, I mean, the board is definitely, in my opinion, from what I've watched, in making the switch in law firms, no offense to the previous one, has did a very good job, because at least we're getting good information that I didn't hear previous of something should have been fought.
Oh, well, all I can say to it, I believe the legal profession, in quotes, profession, is gaming
Okay.
the taxpayers.
We don't need
and-
accusations.
Now, fact,
Accusations.
and I would just say, yes, our police protection is outrageous. I would also say South Coatesville cuts off their police and goes with the state police in the evening.
They haven't.
That's another.
They're
That,
they're still in their negotiation. We thought that too until we talked to their lawyer. They might still have a police force, whether they want one or not.
South Coast?
South Coatesville does not have their police in the
Around the
evening,
clock.
after midnight, around the clock. They use the state police for after, I'm gonna say midnight. That's what I was told by Lewis Wilson,
Wow.
chief of police.
That's not what I understand to be the case, but okay. Okay. Any other comments or questions?
Not on that matter,
All right.
thank you.
I'll just say one comment, you know, we've had a lot of discussion here, and I think it's all valid, but I think they ought to look at other alternatives. At least you can explore them. I don't know about the state police, but somehow to offset some of these costs. Now, use West Calendar, so you can cherry pick, I'm sure, townships here, there, and everywhere. And other ones have hardly anything, you know, nearby. Depends on population and all that stuff. But you can't just say one township, West Callan, is 52%, so I figure that's the average.
50.2,
50.
just a hair over half.
So you can't really use that as, you know, as a metric with regards to what we're paying here. But again, I just say, you know, Board of Supervisors.
No, I agree, it's a lot of money.
Pardon?
I agree, it is a large chunk of money.
It is. And there's somebody, I think, somebody said before, roads, we've been talking about roads for ages. Timacula Road has to be repaid, Tag was here, there's a couple others to be, one here now in Mortonville, and, I mean, you're taking money from this pot, and you're paying somebody else over here when we have some other urgent needs. Thank you.
One last quick question, Steve. The legal fees for negotiations, are they put in the police department? Are they accounted for in the police department? Or are they under general, where they, under what account are they charged? I would have to look at it.
Yeah, we'd have to look that up to see, and we can get an answer for you.
Okay.
I believe they've been relatively minimal, because the board is.
Yeah.
The board did a good job of taking the laboring war and negotiating a lot of
Yeah.
terms to, in order to be efficient and reduce the
There hasn't been much
overall cost.
legal involvement at all. It's been between.
We didn't go to
the police,
arbitration,
yeah.
so that saved
Right.
us like $40,000.
At least.
Well, again, I would suggest the board, I would like to see any legal fees necessitated by the police department to be charged to the police department. And one of the lines, the line item B, legal fees. So,
That's something we can look into.
I'll probably put in a right to know request of that figure.
Okay.
Thank you.
I guess that's one other thing we didn't put in there, Steve, was the fact that had we not settled with them the other day, we would have spent $40,000 in the court. And maybe it costed, that's what I said, by settling it the other day, we saved anywhere between $30,000 and $40,000 in arbitration fees. So if you add that, take that off of what, you know, we didn't want to waste 40 grand to possibly wind up giving them more money and keep the mandatory overtime.
I think that's the pink elephant in the room.
And I forgot about putting that figure out there earlier.
Right, that was gonna be my comment, going into that. One thing is with the police budget, if you look at any municipality's budget, the protection police is usually the highest. I mean, if they're not served by the state troopers. You look at any municipality, the police department is the highest one, in the budget, and it's, you know, because of what they do and the insurance that's involved, there's a lot involved in that area, and that's the norm for most municipalities. One of the things, I mean, about the processes, about how this works, is that once the board goes into negotiations, it's a difficult situation, because a lot of the former stuff in the contract is hard to beat. What a township goes through is that there's 3 arbitrators put to the board and to the police department. The township gets to strike 1 arbitrator, the police get to strike 1 arbitrator, and then the one left is the one that will be making the decision. If you look at a lot of these decisions by these arbitrators, they're not usually in favor of the municipality at all. And it makes sense, I mean, from a business perspective, because what police department would ever choose that arbitrator if they sided against them? I mean, it's just it's a practicality of union negotiations, where an arbitrator might side against the township because you don't technically have it's a bigger body. It's looked at as always deeper pockets and not so many people that they're technically looking at, like they're looking at officers. They're not really seeing all the residents behind the supervisors. And the township's lost twice in arbitration. You know, it hasn't done well in arbitration, and then you have the expense of arbitration. I think last time it was even more than 40. And that's an expense that comes into play. And you risk against the police department them asking for more, because the arbitrator might see very easily something else that he sees in other contracts, and then the township can lose further than that. That's one of the hardest things about this process, is that there's not much the board can do. We did speak with the legal representation in the end, and he looked over everything, and he didn't feel like he could win much, and given the time. I will say this, I mean, this is one dig here. I did notice with the Public Works Department, legal services was with the board all the way through. Yeah, with the police contract, it was brought in almost in the end. I think that's one thing that I'm a little hesitant on, of how this process went down versus how we handled the Public Works Department. But truthfully, to go into arbitration, I think the township would just lose. I think the arbitrator would more than likely, if you look at arbitrator decisions, they even go against their own police chiefs out there. I mean, Philadelphia police chief went after an officer that was going to the Phillies games. The arbitrator came in, gave him his job back. The police chief up in Philadelphia tried to do things like make sure cars stay, with the municipality. The arbitrator said, turn that around, allowed them to take it home. The arbitrator is, again, not so favorable to the government body from what I've seen. I'm not faulting arbitrators, but I think, quite frankly, we probably would have lost. And given that we didn't bring in legal representation till the end, as our attorney said, he's behind the 8 ball to even do anything here. The other thing about my vote, I don't have a plan B. The only plan B I would have, given, that I'm on a board, is to go into arbitration, and I just discussed everything, what can you do there? I also represent a lot of residents in the township, regardless of my own opinion. I have to respect what, that I've seen at the school meetings, and there's a lot of people that value, not that I don't, but there's a great value on the police department, and, I saw there was 11 positives on Facebook. It's not a lot, but I mean, there's not a lot at the meetings, so I'm taking those people in consideration as well, given the people that care, that obviously by responding as you folks do, but I don't have a plan B, there really isn't.
And I'd much rather give 10,000 of that 40 we were going to spend at arbitration to the guys that work for him. At least I'm getting something for that 10,000.
And to speak to the negotiations as well with the Public Works, we weren't allowed to work directly with the public Works Department. It had to go through the teams.
The attorney.
And attorney, and the Public Works people were not at negotiations like the police were. So it's a much better process at times, I think, going back and forth, working with the people that you're working on a contract with, so.
Right, but at the same time, with the attorney.
But yeah, I don't disagree that,
He
maybe
was
next
brought in
time
late, he even.
we can bring him in sooner and see where we're at, but. We're taking, okay, a few more comments. And
I have one further the last comment, and it seems like, if you say something about police, and as being concerned about the budget, that people want to paint you as anti-police or against the police. I'm not against the police. I'm gonna call them if somebody's trying to break in. I'm calling them.
Right,
Okay, so it's not like we're against the police, we're just questioning,
against that.
is there
amount of money.
alternatives to bring the budget down a little bit? That's what I'm saying. And I'm sure Irv and whoever has said anything to this topic is basically, saying the same thing.
And there's something to be said on that. I mean, my whole presence coming up the board, I'm not anti-police myself. I have police officers in my own family in New Jersey, and I've never been against that. I've always been just about the numbers coming in here. But to your point, I mean, no one values law more than I've had 3 federal crimes committed against me in the name of politics, from forgery, identity theft,